All right, we've got something fun at the Young Turks now. You know how we started TYT Nation, where we're taking your video submissions? Hello, all of a sudden, the TYT Nation Video of the Week! And different Young Turks hosts, non-hosts, etc., people here at Rebel headquarters will decide who the Video of the Week is going to be. First week, I'm up. I have decided the first ever TYT Nation Video of the Week is Professor Rich, a very, very long-time listener and viewer of the show. He has sent in a video about the golden gimmick on how we started the oil subsidies in the first place. I like the idea of TYT history. I like the video. So here it is.
Hey, this is Professor Rich, and this is TYT History, where we try to put some of the big stories of the day in an historical context. And what I want to talk today about is an oil subsidy called the golden gimmick. Now, oil subsidies have been in the news lately because Congress talked a lot of noise about maybe getting rid of the oil subsidies, and then, of course, decided not to. Let me start with a real brief history of oil in America. For a long time in this country, oil was controlled by a monopoly called Standard Oil, which was run by John D. Rockefeller. That's a name you probably all know, but that's who he is. Antitrust laws forced Standard Oil to break up, and it became a lot of smaller, although still pretty big companies, with names today like Exxon, Texaco, Mobil. But they've always been very closely connected and worked very closely together. Well, in 1949, Venezuela, who's a big oil producer, decided they were going to nationalize their oil, or they were going to have the government take over the oil production in Venezuela, and then the government would profit from the drilling of oil. We don't like nationalization, and the American government anyway saw nationalization as sort of anti-capitalist and therefore communist, and also saw it as the government making a profit where a private company could. And we really didn't like nationalism, particularly when it was being done by a foreign country with a resource that we liked. Now, it's worth pointing out that in 2008, Sarah Palin was the most popular governor in America, largely because she did kind of an Alaska state-level version of nationalization of oil, and then took the proceeds and gave it to the people up there. So it's okay if you're a Republican, but otherwise it makes you a dirty commie, and we have to do something about it. In fact, in 1953, Eisenhower will have the democratically elected government of Iran overthrown because they're trying to nationalize their oil. But so in 1949, Venezuela is trying to nationalize their oil, and Royal Dutch Shell and Jersey what is that company called? Jersey Standard Oil will cut a deal with the Venezuelan government so they don't lose out on all that oil. And the deal will be that for every dollar of profit those oil companies make off Venezuelan oil, they will then return half of that, 50 cents for every dollar, to Venezuela. Well, within a year, the details of this deal have gotten out, and Saudi Arabia, who of course is filled with oil, wants the same deal. Now, the American oil companies drilling in Saudi Arabia are under a consortium called Aramco, Arab American company. And Saudi Arabia wants to get half the profits from the drilling of Saudi Arabian oil. But of course the oil companies like getting the oil for free. They don't want to have to pay for their raw materials. Just like how business works. You go and you take all the raw materials for free and then sell them to other people and keep all the money that you make, right? That's how your business works. Now Truman, who's president at the time, is worried that Saudi Arabia might move towards the Soviets, basically because of our support for Israel. The big concern is that we're backing Israel. The Muslims don't like Israel. Now Saudi Arabia is talking about nationalizing their oil, which is kind of communist anyway. And so we're worried we might lose them. Now, we don't actually need oil in America at the time. We're producing more than we use. We're energy independent still at this point. But Europe and Japan desperately need the oil, and they're our allies, and we're still trying to help them rebuild from World War II. And so Truman is really interested in keeping Saudi Arabia on our side. And so you may think we've got a real problem here. Saudi Arabia wants to make money off the oil, Exxon doesn't want to share any of the money, and Truman wants to make both sides happy. But you're forgetting about the fourth player in this little drama, which is the American taxpayer. So Truman comes up with this scheme. I'm sure it wasn't Truman, but somebody in his administration. Aramco will make all the money they can off of the Saudi Arabian oil, and then they will give half of the money to Saudi Arabia. Well, what about Aramco? Well, the U.S. government will then allow all the companies in Aramco to deduct the amount they give to Saudi Arabia from the taxes they pay, not from their income, but from the actual taxes that they pay, basically making up all that lost money. Well, it's a lot of money too. The minimum is actually $50 million. That's the legal minimum that's going to be set. But of course, it's usually going to be much, much higher than that. Now, in today's terms, that's about $500 million a year, and that number is going to grow over the years because obviously oil profits are going to grow. And of course, who's going to pay for all that money? Who's going to make up for that shortfall? The American taxpayer. So everybody gets what they want. Truman gets Saudi Arabia happy. Saudi Arabia gets their money. Exxon gets all their money. They don't have to share any of it ultimately. I'm sorry, Aramco. I keep wanting to call them Exxon. And of course, the American taxpayer does not get what they want. We get to pay more and more and more. Now, keep in mind, we're already running deficits at this point, or actually later on in this period, we're going to be running deficits. And so this is one of the reasons, honestly, why we owe money. I know people like to blame it on Social Security and high school teachers getting paid too much and that sort of thing. But this is probably a bigger factor, ultimately, these sorts of subsidies to industry. Now, the reason we did it this way, instead of just giving money to Saudi Arabia, is because Israel. We thought that Israel would get really uncomfortable and really upset at the idea of us giving enormous amounts of money to somebody they saw as an enemy. And so we did this kind of backdoor subsidy program to get money to Saudi Arabia. Well, eventually the American public and Israel will find out, and that's when it gets this nickname, the Golden Gimmick. Well, Israel, interestingly enough, doesn't demand that we stop giving money to their enemy, Saudi Arabia. They actually are going to demand that we give them money too. They don't want us to stop paying them. They want us to pay Israel too. So now, and we do, of course, so now every time Aramco makes $1, the American taxpayer has to give 50 cents to Saudi Arabia and 50 cents to Israel to keep everybody happy. Of course, this is, of course, these corporations in America, they're the ones that say you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you make your own way, your success is determined by your hard work, small government, laissez-faire, free markets. But of course, you don't have to look very far into their own histories to see that nothing could be further from the truth when we look at the success of a lot of these American corporations. If you haven't checked out my videos on why Iran doesn't like us, our judicial activism, now would be a great time to do that. Thanks for listening.
For more video submissions by Professor Rich or other folks, go to TYT Nation. And also, we'd love to have your submission as well. Check out the videos and participate. Young Turks, too strong.